Hello and welcome to another video. In this one we're going to be talking about software versioning, which I know is a bit of a contentious topic. I'm going to show you what I try and do for my things that I version, and I'll talk about a little bit about the general approaches that people use. So I personally try to stick to semantic versioning when I version my software. I know semantic versioning is not perfect, and we're going to talk about why it's not perfect. But I'm going to explain what it is and how I try and approach it. Without further ado, let's jump into it. So fortunately for semantic versioning, there is a website which defines the whole thing. So if you don't get the content as I tell it to you, you can always go to semver.org and, review the same content yourself. In a bit of a twist, semantic versioning is actually semantically versioned itself and is at the 2.0 version. Each of these, or I guess 2.0.0, and we'll talk about what each of these mean a little bit more in a second. But the fact that it's at 2.0 is actually kind of interesting. So let's talk about the components of a version. There is major, minor, and patch. There are three components to the version. If you don't have a minor or a patch, you can often just leave these out and just say this is version 2 or version 2.0 if you don't care about the patch version. But generally you utilize three components of a version. The major version is where you make version incompatible changes. So because semantic versioning is version 2.0, that means that they have made one incompatible change. We'll talk more about why it wouldn't be two incompatible changes in a minute. A minor version is when you add functionality but don't change any existing functionality. So this is a minor increment of the version, so you would increment the middle number. And the last is patch, which I usually refer to as the bug fix number, where you fix some functionality but don't break existing functionality. So you may fix some behavior that's incorrect. You also don't introduce new behaviors at the same time. And this is, the guidelines of semantic versioning. There are also other version numbers that can be handled as well for pre-releases, post-releases, and stuff like that. We won't really cover those because, I don't find them that interesting, and I don't really use them myself. If we scroll down here, we'll talk a little bit more about the other things that it talks about. The first thing, and I actually think this is less important than they put importance on, and it says that a thing should declare its public API. This is what we talk about when we're talking about breaking changes or new functionality or fixes here. You're really talking about your public API. I don't think that it's super important to publicly document it, but documentation is always good. We already talked about this. Version numbers are immutable. This is to say, you can't re-release new code using the same version number that you've already used. Most package management systems prevent this. So, you can't upload a package with the same version number to PyPI. Well, you actually can. There's some ways to cheat it, but you're not supposed to be able to do it. You can't replace a file that's already been uploaded. And this is where post versioning comes into play. You may botch a release and need to release the same contents but with different metadata, and so you would release 1.2.3.post1 or something like that. The next part, and this is actually why version 2.0 doesn't have two sets of breaking changes. Anything before version 0 does not apply to any of these rules. So you can break stuff, you can add, you can remove functionality if you're a 0 version library. And the funny thing about zero version library, and I actually really like that somebody made a website for this. There's actually zerover.org, which is zero versioning, which is kind of a little tongue-in-cheek poke fun at the semver page. But it's basically if your first number is 0, you can break whatever you want. And I actually use zero versioning for some amount of my libraries and tools, where either I'm not happy with the functionality, I know it's intentionally incomplete, or I might rehaul the whole thing at some point. One example of a project that I actually use every day, so I probably should 1.0 it, is actually my text editor, which is currently sitting at version 0.0.16, so double zero ver here. But I've made 16 releases of this as I've added functionality. But the internals of Babby are changing around a lot, and the functionality and ideas keep changing. So I didn't really want to set in stone any of the stuff that I'm doing. And granted, it's not setting in stone because there's probably not enough people using my text editor that I could message each of them individually and say, hey, I'm changing this, so make sure your theme or whatever is up to date. But there are some things that I do that are 0 versioned. But most of them follow semantic versioning. So you can see, like, pre-commit, for example, we're at version 2.7.1, which means I've made 1 breaking change, I've made 7 releases which introduce functionality, and on the latest release I've made a single bug fix release. And I've made hundreds of releases of pre-commit, and this is where we've ended up at this point. Now, for example, PyUpgrade is another library that I've done. This is also at wait. This one's also at 2.7.1. Wait, this was the example that I wanted to use. How are they also? They're in exactly the same version. Is it pre-commit hooks? That's not the right repository. Pre-commit hooks. This one has made 2 breaking changes and 1 feature. I don't know. I had one package that at some point was like version 1.27. something, which was basically that it had not made any breaking changes, but it had made lots of feature releases. But anyway, that's kind of the way that I approach versioning here. 0 version is pretty funny. But yeah, the rest of this is mostly talking about the stuff we talked about before. So this is one way to version packages, and the reason that this is not always the greatest version, or one of the reasons, there's probably many reasons, one of the reasons that this is not a great versioning scheme or doesn't always work is it's very hard to be exact when you're talking about the definitions of what is breaking or non-breaking functionality. One example is when dealing with security fixes, because a lot of security fixes will prevent some functionality in the operation of a program, and maybe someone was depending on that broken functionality, and so by fixing the broken functionality, you're breaking some of your users, but you're also solving a bug. I think, like, strictly, if you were doing strict semantic versioning, you would probably just bump the major version every time, because who knows, you might accidentally break a user. But I think the point of semantic versioning is it's about the intent of the version number. So, like, I as the maintainer think that I'm fixing a bug. I may have actually broken some functionality, but I'm going to increment the bug fix, the patch revision. And because of this, and because, like, bumping the version, may not properly indicate that it's a bug fix or a feature or a breaking change, some other versioning schemes have come up, and I think the most popular of them is calendar versioning. I think it's calver.org. Yes, so calendar versioning is another popular way to version stuff. And the thing with calendar versioning is the version number really doesn't mean anything. I mean, it tracks the date and the time that the package was released, but you can't really infer anything about whether the API changes in any compatible way. So you're free to make a breaking change in every single release if you really wanted to. But usually it's numbered based on the the year or the month or whatever, however you want to do it. For instance, like Ubuntu is calendar version, so I'm running the version 20.04, which was released in January, February, March, April of 2020. Yeah, I know how to number months. But yeah, calendar versioning is another alternative to semantic versioning. But I version my stuff with semantic versioning. Some of the packages that I contribute to also do that, and you're free to choose whichever versioning scheme that you want. But anyway, hopefully this was interesting or useful. Thank you all for watching. If you guys have additional stuff that you want me to talk about, leave a comment below or reach out to me on the various platforms. But have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!